Welcome to Rodney Veal's Inspired By, a production of Public Media Connect, the regional partnership of CET in Cincinnati and Think TV in Dayton. Rodney Veal, our host for this podcast, is an independent choreographer, interdisciplinary artist, and all-around fan of all things arts and creativity, and he's excited to share another great conversation with you. Thank you for listening, and if you enjoy the show, please subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
I am joined today in conversation with the fabulous Amy Deal, an artist and raconteur who is, I've given you a title, Amy, who's just fantastic and fabulous to be around and makes amazing art. So we're going to have a great conversation about all things visual arts. So hi, Amy.
Hi, Rodney.
How are you? How finds you today? How are you doing?
Oh, really well, relaxed. All I have to do is paint for 2 deadlines.
Oh, okay. Just a typical life of an artist. You're constantly going. Okay. So, which I know this is what I love about you. You're constantly working and evolving and making work. But I promise, it's going to be kind of this is your life sort of scenario. So you, Amy, I love the fact that you're from a place called Cranberry Prairie, Ohio.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, so talk about that. I mean, the fact that you put down your roots in Ohio, but talk about the experience of growing up in Cranberry, Ohio, and how that led to being an artist.
Oh, I am so glad you asked. I never really get to talk about this. Henry Stuckey bought it, and my grandma Hilda said, "Henry, what are you going to do with this swamp?" And my grandfather was one of the first to tile. You tile the field, and all the water is gone, and it is the most beautiful, fertile soil in Ohio. So growing up, my dad worked with his family, and they were potato farmers. And I just got to play in the dirt and the mud all day long.
I love that. The fact that you got to, the fact that you really too are an artist who grew up in rural Ohio, as opposed to I grew up in the big city and I want to be this artist. So for those of us who, and I do come from a rural background as well. I mean, late in life, it was more like Green Acres, Zsa Zsa Gabor, you show up and all of a sudden they're asking you to hitch a plow. I'm like, wow, that's deep. not good for a 7th grader. So what about that experience? Because I know for me, it was like being surrounded by nature, being kind of isolated. Did that kind of inform being creative, or was this just something that you kind of stumbled upon, or did it just kind of manifest itself, so to speak?
Looking back, I had the best childhood. I would get on my bike, and we had neighbors that we could hang out with. We had a creek next to our house, but we called it a crick. And we also had a gun club nearby, and we would ride our bikes to the gun club, and there was a pond. So perfectly idyllic childhood. We would collect tadpoles, take them home. I would break into the gun club and steal these little clay pigeons, take those home and build my mud pies in them. And when they would dry, I would have to find paint. So I would get on my bike, and there were railroad lilies, those orange lilies in all of the roads along the road. And we would grab those, we'd grab dandelions, we'd grab whatever we could. And I literally would mash this stuff down to make pigments. And that's what I would paint my beautiful mud pies with.
Oh my God. I mean, the fact that you're making your own pigment. I mean,
Yeah.
that's come on. I mean, how did you just come up with the idea of doing that? I mean, is it just like you just said, oh, well, this does that? I mean, most kids aren't that inventive. Let's be honest.
I had an older brother, a younger brother, and a younger sister. And like I said, a lot of neighbors. And we were just left to ourselves where we could just roam and explore and experiment. I'm surprised some of us are still living. Our crick would, when it rained, it would fill up, and down further there was this big pipe that would just be full of water. And we would get, because we came from farmers, we would get those big, huge tractor inner tubes, and we'd go sailing. If our parents saw what we were doing, I'm sure they would have stopped us. But we really just had the freedom.
Oh, and I love that. I mean, and so because I always think that freedom allows for the creative process to happen. So
Absolutely.
this is like the start of it. What was kind of the catalyst for you to say, you know what? How do I translate this into being a visual artist and wanting to be a visual artist? Because if you're
You
not
know,
surrounded by it,
right. I think a lot of it was more, I'm just a very visual person. I'm a visual learner, and I like to work with my hands. When it comes to sound, anything auditory, I'm awful at it. I've never understood music well. I just understand seeing things and looking at things. And I early on, my eyes were always the most important thing.
that's right. Kent State. That's right. You started off as a BFA in
Right.
Kent.
And then I started working in Dayton as a graphic designer, art director, creative director. And at that point, I felt that nobody really took the creative person seriously. And I thought, well, I'll show them. I'm going to go get my MBA, which I started. But then I got married and pregnant, and that kind of ended in the middle of that. And I never finished. But I was going to show them.
You're going to show them that creativity
Hmm.
does matter. And what I love is the fact that you know, visual communication and visual design, which were you working at an advertising agency or were you just working freelance? I mean, where did your kind of creativity land as far as, you know, keeping the roof over one's head, so to
I
speak?
started at an investor relations firm, and I got that job before I graduated college. I went to work and I designed annual reports, which were beautiful pieces of art back in the 80s. Today, everything's online, which obviously, print is basically dying. From there, I wanted to do more creative work. So I took a position at Real Art Design Group, which is still here in Dayton. And I was the art director there, which I got to do a lot more creative advertising campaigns and corporate identities, which I really enjoyed. And then from there, I thought, I want to go more, I want to do a little bit more on the business side. So I took a marketing directorship at a place called CTG, and they basically sold computer cables, which was interesting to learn because I did marketing. I would go to trade shows. And I think that's when I really decided I wanted to get my MBA through that. Art was always there for me.
What I love is, like, you know, because I fell in love with your work with the typography series of
Oh, yeah,
I
I
love I
forgot
love
about that.
yes, and because I always thought about the graphic nature of your work, and it was so striking, and it was so different from everyone else, and so that influence of being in that sort of commercial realm of art, then transitioning into this more, I don't want to say fine art because I just feel
Hmm.
like it's art is art. But I mean, did you feel like you needed to make that it was okay to kind of reference starting off as that reference point? Because was that the very first series of work, the typography series, or was it something else?
Really getting back into art after I had the kids, yes, it was the first series. And I love typography. I always have. And even my daughters have become type nerds where they literally will not go to a restaurant if their logo is in a hideous font, which I'm really somewhat proud of, but you know.
So no papyrus. We don't do
Well,
papyrus.
papyrus was nice at one time. The one thing that we always joke about is the Curls MT, where still to this day there are restaurants on their, Curls MT. And no, we're not going there.
I love the fact that your like the typography will determine your meal for
I
the
know,
day.
isn't that awful?
No, well, I don't think it's no worse than decor. I mean, you know, I
Well,
live with an interior
it's like,
designer. It's like, oh,
right, it's
these
like
lamps
dirty
are hideous. We got to
windows.
go.
Right.
Dirty windows, exactly.
My grandmother would not go to a restaurant with dirty windows. So we won't go unless the typography's nice.
So listen up, restaurateurs. Really pay attention to graphic design and typography of your signs and your menus. I mean, I think that's kind of important. There are many reasons and factors that draw us in and draw us out, and that's what drew me in. because you clearly understood really good typography, but then it just translated itself into such beautiful images. And I was like,
Oh, thank
oh
you.
man, here's this Amy Deal making this really incredible art, doing it in a different, because it didn't look like everyone else's. And so you stand out. Your artwork does
Oh,
stand out. So, I
well,
mean,
now I'm going to go back in the studio and work on the type again. You've inspired me,
oh,
Rodney.
yes, I love it. Please keep going, keep going. So I have a question, because this is one of the things that I always think about growing
Mhm.
up in rural Ohio. Is it nature versus nurture in the creative process? Was it just being surrounded by nature that inspired the creativity, or was it the nurturing of your parents to be creative? Did your parents kind of like get on board with? My parents were really on board with me being an artist. They didn't understand half the stuff I did, but they were on board.
That's so nice. Yes, my parents, I'm going to say it was both nature and nurture. The area I came from, and still to this day, it's a very traditional area, and women were always expected to get married and have children. And my parents made it very clear that they would do everything they could to help me go further and get an education. Uh, they helped me sign for the loans that I did pay for myself, but they made it possible because they were never given that opportunity. My mother was never able to go to secondary education, to college, for the reason that she was female. Her parents were just like, ah, you're just going to get married.
Our circumstances do inform our creative practice. So I mean if someone is nurturing that proposition that, okay, Amy's not just going to be a girl, she's also can be her own person. And so I
Right.
mean that's critical. Is that critical? That's important. I feel personally, do you feel that's important to your
I
creative
think it's
process?
really important. And you know what? You made me just think. My mother was always, she was drawing and she would do silhouettes, faces, which I would always love to sit and watch her do. And the thing I love the most is whenever they went out and we had a babysitter, she would always pull a box together of junk, paper plates, paper cups, markers, crayons, glue, a pair of scissors, and I would just spend the whole evening cutting and building things. I always had a card table in my bedroom so that I could cut and paste and glue and build, like dioramas. Do you remember dioramas?
Oh yeah, totally.
I'd
Oh
spend
god,
hours.
we're very similar. I think I took over my entire parents' basement building stuff out of cardboard, like
Oh,
fake cities. I
I
love
wish you
building
would
fake
have
cities.
been my neighbor.
Oh, totally. You and I would have had way too much fun. Way too much fun.
Right.
And yeah, so that's kind of, to me, that's like, I want our listeners to kind of know that, it's that sense of creative play still manifests itself in your work. There's a
Mhm,
creative playfulness, there's a
mhm.
joy and exuberance to your work. And see, I'm fanboying out. I mean, I think even the producer's like, his voice has changed. He loves talking to Amy. I'm like,
And I
so
crush on you, you know that.
yeah, it's a mutual admiration society. And that's why I wanted to ask these questions. So I know that, since the typography and you've kind of evolved, and let's talk about the evolution of your work, because there are a couple factors. We always talk about, time being an
Mhm.
essence, but also space. You went from, now this is what's crazy for our viewers. She went from mom being in a very very lovely suburban setting, and your husband Kevin is an awesome guy, and you moved from suburbia to downtown, and I can't even begin to describe, folks. They have created an urban oasis with their home. It is just pretty amazing. I won't give away the location, but it's just fantastic, because I don't want people just banging on your door like all hours of the night. Although I did see that video of the ring,
Oh,
your outdoor
wasn't that
video.
great?
Yeah, it was like, wow, love does happen in our
That was
community
so
outside your building.
sweet.
Very sweet. But I mean, that transition. And so, like, what's changed with that transition from being suburban mom, empty nester, to downtown urban oasis? Do you think that's totally changed the scope of your work?
A little bit, of course. Having the children, we wanted a school system for them. We did what we thought was best. And the minute the youngest graduated, both Kevin and I were like, let's do something. And We stayed in the area because his parents were here. My parents, my mother is now, she's still up north. He has since lost both his parents, and I've lost my father. And this was all going on while we were knocking down walls in this building we purchased. But it is so perfect. I'm so glad we did it. We're in the middle of the action. We went to see a show at the Victoria on Saturday night, and we could just walk, and it was wonderful. So definitely best move we ever made to move downtown.
Having that space and that freedom to do it, and knowing that the work that you're doing, and the other divergent, obviously, to all artists, was COVID.
Exactly. I loved COVID. It gave me every reason to stay inside. But what really happened was, and this is so interesting, I got to speak with some students at Upper Arlington last week. And so I had to put together a little PowerPoint, and I figured out why things evolved the way they did. It was about 5 or 6 years ago. I was on the board of a soup kitchen, and they were having this event, and they needed centerpieces, and they put me in charge. And I thought, well, I'm not going to go spend money on flowers. This is ridiculous. We're here to raise money to feed people. So I went to the soup kitchen and I gathered all their recyclable trash. And I thought, I'm going to build centerpieces out of this. And I did. I cut, pasted, painted flowers out of plastic. And then it turned into, oh gosh, this is kind of fun. I want to make this big, huge so-called living wall out of plastic, which I did at the time. And then I took it up to Grand Rapids to their art prize. And awesomely, I was in the top 25, which was so great. And then the convention center bought the piece. So that was gone. And I thought, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to get back to painting. It was a nice break. But then during COVID, I started noticing all of the plastic that was coming into our house, a lot of single-use plastic bags. So I thought, I've got time right now. I'm going to see what I can do with these. And I started fusing them together, which made them more rigid. And I really wanted an excuse to sit behind the sewing machine with headphones on to listen to books. So this was the perfect project. I started cutting, and then I started sewing petals and flowers. And I think I spent an entire month sitting at the sewing machine, and I think I listened to 50 books. It was the best time of my life. I'm sorry, everyone.
Isolation was good for you, wasn't it?
Yes,
It was a good.
put me in a closet. I'll be fine.
I love it. I love it. So we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to dive into something you just mentioned, which was the Grand Rapids Arts Prize, and we're going to talk about that adventure.
I'm Ann Rodolanti, a member of the Inspired by team and the series producer of the art show. If you're enjoying this podcast, I'd love to tell you about the art show, also hosted by Rodney Veal. Each week, Rodney profiles the worlds of art, music, dance, and theater in and around Southwest Ohio, along with cultural highlights from across the nation. Stream it now on the official Art Show YouTube channel or on the PBS app. Thanks, and now back to the show.
So, Amy, what I love is you mentioned earlier, you talked about the Grand Rapids Art Prize, and I had a conversation with someone about it just the other day because they were talking about it's transitioning. But describe for our listeners the Grand Rapids Art Prize, and then talk about your involvement with the Grand Rapids Arts Prize.
I really didn't know much about it until, I'm trying to think, I had never even visited it until I entered that piece. And it's a really great show, although I have a different view now, and I'll explain it to you. The thing is, the entire city, each venue will welcome as many pieces of art as they can fit in. And then I think it's a 3-week period, September, October, where everyone can just walk around the city, view all of the art. And the year I was in it, the way it worked was everybody would vote on which talked to them, which they felt was really inspiring and important. And that's how they would tabulate the top 25 pieces. But what was interesting with COVID, they had to take a break, and then they changed it to everyone could vote and you could give money, like kind of like, oh, pop, $5, you can award this to whoever you want. And it turned out everybody was awarding money to themselves. And it just didn't make sense to me. And it kind of
Oh.
ruined the whole thing for me. And I know then they were transitioning into like larger installations, which I don't know enough about it, but I know they're making new changes. And I have a feeling you know more about that than I do.
And I think one of the things is I think that it's kind of landed at their community college, their state community college in the
Oh,
region. So it's kind of one of these situations where it's kind of going to morph again. So I think that it may go back to its true essence of when you were participating, but then it's going to evolve beyond the fiasco of the money
uh-huh.
and the voting, which was really, I remember that phase. I'm like, this is weird, odd. But as a prize, what was so unusual was a city in America actually devoting itself to this proposition of
Their
turning
commitment,
itself.
right? Their commitment to art was just excellent, wonderful. It was so great to visit.
Yeah, and for our listeners, Grand Rapids is a pretty cool city. I have to say, I was beyond the art prize. I've actually had the great good fortune to go to Grand Rapids a couple times, and I just fell in love with the city. And I love their museum. I think they have
Mhm.
one of the that's a killer
And the
experience.
Meyer Sculpture Garden,
Oh,
incredible.
yeah, those two locations. You go to the museum and the Meyer Sculpture Garden, you will not be disappointed because they are just this really great contemporary artwork set in this botanical garden that's just stunning.
It
I
is.
was it's worth the drive,
It
people. Always
absolutely is.
art resist. And so do you find yourself because the Grand Rapids Art Prize is a pretty big thing. Are you applying to other kind of art prizes, or is it just you just making art to exhibit and showing galleries and museum spaces, or are you doing the other things that artists normally do?
Right now, it's interesting. What I'm doing is I'm just doing stuff to pay the bills. I just got a commission, a Kroger commission, and I don't know if I'd call it art, but it's kind of a nice break. It is an 8-foot by 24-foot mural, which basically goes onto 6 4x8 sheet panels, and it's of Miamisburg, Ohio, for their new Kroger. And they pay you well for this. So I designed it, they chose it, and it just offers all little pieces of Miamisburg with their river, the mound, the Victorian homes. So that's in my studio right now, and I have, I think, 2 more weeks yet to finish it, which I am actually on track.
You are
Believe
on
it or
track.
not.
I love it. I love it. I love those commissions that pay the bills. I mean,
Yeah.
that's yeah.
And then on Monday, I'm installing a piece for the Metro Library, their new location, the Northmont location in Inglewood. And it's focused on real, because it's so close to Marie All Garden.
Mhm.
I went with wildflowers and growing up and literally just laying in a field of wildflowers, Ohio wildflowers. And I'm excited to hang that. And that's a nice big 2-piece panel. I just got a grant from the National Endowment of Arts. I had the opportunity to curate all of the art at our new Five Rivers Health Center, the Edgemont campus. And they went out and they bought all local art. Their commitment to local artists is phenomenal. And then they had all this art and they didn't know what to do with it. And so I got to go through it and arrange it throughout the building, which was really a lot of fun. But then as I sat there, I'm like, you guys have 88 exam rooms without art. We need to do something about this. And so the grant gave me money to go into some of their area elementary schools. And I'm working with the students and we're creating art for the exam rooms.
Really connected to the community, and I love that. And so this whole, it's like because you're at a place now as an art maker, you're established. So one of the things that with making those kind of connections to the community, is that important to you, that it's
Yes,
community
and
based and it's local artists? I mean, that's important.
it's really important. And I have to mention that this grant through the National Endowment of Arts came through Culture Works, Dayton, Ohio. I have to mention that because they're important. The thing, I designed this mural for downtown Riverscape, and the thing that was
I was
most
going to talk about
important
that.
to
Yeah.
me was I wanted the community to feel ownership in it. I wanted it to speak to everybody. I wanted it to speak to the people that want to fish. I wanted it to speak to the kayakers, to the people that love the nature. I just wanted everybody to be a part of it.
That's pretty cool. I was going to say, because for our listeners, the mural is at the Riverscape, which is our Dayton Metro Parks site. It's a beautiful mural. I think we've actually featured said mural on the art show.
You
Have we
did.
not? Yes, we did. See, this is a full circle moment there. So people can actually go and watch the segment and actually see the work. But I love the fact that it's never just, your work is never just about the self-indulgences of Amy. Like, I'm a self-indulging. It's like you're saying, it's like transforming the centerpieces for a soup kitchen, for making art that's going to be embraced and enjoyed by the community. There's always that other layer. Is that what drives you to make, or is it what's the fundamental essence of what drives you to make what you make and how you make it?
Yeah, I think you've got that right there. There's always a problem and there's a solution. And I guess I would consider myself a visual problem solver. And whenever there's an opportunity to create art, I want to bring the attention to something that matters most. Just like with all the plastic, I really wanted to bring attention to recycling, and we really need to recycle, especially the single-use plastic. And you start researching it, and fun fact, every American family takes home 1,500 single-use shopping bags a year, and only 1% is being recycled, which is ridiculous. And then I have a daughter, she lives in Manhattan, and there are no plastic bags anywhere in the city. We can do that all over our country. There's no reason we can't eliminate the single-use plastic. But as far as a visual problem solver, and I want to bring attention to things, I did another mural. It ended up, we refer to it as the Love Doves, and it's in Dayton, but it really gives reference to Paul Laurence Dunbar and this beautiful poem that he wrote. And it was about love and doves. And with Dayton being the center of the Dayton Accords, I just felt it was really important to show the peace doves in Dayton. Major history happened here with the Bosnia-Herzegovina War, that they were able to settle it here in Dayton, Ohio.
That matters. I love the fact that you've tied that all in. And what I love is the fact that a lot of people don't recognize art and politics and culture and society. It's all intertwined. So these questions of solutions, maybe look to the artists for solutions to our global problems. And I think you identify it with the single use. The fact that a family uses 1,500 single use bags.
Can you believe that?
That's a lot of waste. I mean, that's something to ponder and consider. And so, but you've turned it into works of art to still make a point about, we could do better, which is, right. I love that you point. Like, if it could happen in Manhattan, it can happen here in Dayton, Ohio.
Exactly.
And speaking of Manhattan, what I love is that clearly creativity runs in the DNA of the deals, is that your daughter is an art maker in her own right.
She's just not afraid of anything. There is no fear. She just jumps in and does it, which, she's young.
The young, they jump without parachutes. And so do you go and see, when you go to visit her in New York, do you go see a lot of art? I mean, I know you do, but for our viewers, so who has excited you? Like, you've gone to New York, like, who is like jumping out to you saying, oh, this is somebody worth following?
I really like the little dive galleries, and the name, they're not well known. The larger galleries, it's just weird how some of the stuff becomes worth a lot of money. And I don't know if I'll ever understand that part of it. But I do. I like the experimental, odd art.
So how do you find? How do you find those dive places? Is your daughter just like tapped in, like, because she's so young, she knows where it's like, this is where you go? Do you need to hook up with like somebody who's young, in the sense of hey, take me on a journey to places in New York not seen.
That, and there are some apps out there. Is it Seesaw that you can find whatever's going on that weekend? There are openings every single day somewhere.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And so, I mean, because you're seeing, I love it, that there are apps. And I would encourage most people, if you're going, and I think you would agree, if you're going on vacation, go look at some art. I think that's far more
Absolutely.
I think it's far more satisfying than just laying on the beach, quite frankly. But go experience some art. And so,
I agree.
because it's like, is there one artist for you? Because your work is so uniquely tied to you and your thoughts and your philosophies on making and your playfulness. Was there one artist that really you admired and said, this is kind of inspired me to work in the way that I'm working?
That's a hard question. That's like asking me my favorite color or my favorite child. There are too many. There are really too many, and everybody is so different in their own way. I'm sorry, Rodney. I just don't think I can answer it. I really, the traditional, the Monets, the whole surrealism movement. I really liked Jim Dine at one point. I just couldn't get enough of him. There are
Oh
just
yeah.
so many. I
And
really
that's
love the whole Dada movement. I like
okay.
weird art.
I love the fact you love wood art. I think that's why we're kindred spirits. I mean, because I just love a good performative art piece. Like if there's music
Uh-huh.
and dance connected to visuals, I'm like, I'm in. This is crazy and weird.
Yeah.
I need I need a combination of elements because
Mhm.
I'm like you in that sense of visual, but I need that energy of
Yes.
motion. I
Yes.
recognize that because that's how I work. I work with music blaring and me dancing around the piece and making movement while I'm making it. So you're just kind of like stimulus. So I have a question, because this is a question I've always wanted to ask a kindred spirit. If money was no object, and this is so stealing from Talk Art, the
Ah,
podcast, if money was no object, but it's a riff, what kind of art project would you just do? Like if nothing, if like there was no
oh, that I would
cost
do?
involved, that you would make. Like what would you do if if money was no object? If nothing could
Oh gosh,
stop you from making it.
this is so weird. I've never even thought about this before, but it jumped right into my mind. I would do like a huge Christo over the Statue of Liberty in my typography. Can I do that, please?
Yes, I mean it's like money's no object. This is the fantasy version of art making projects.
And
Yeah.
I'll sew it all out of fused plastic. The material, it'll all be fused plastic over the Statue of Liberty, and I'll paint on top of it.
Oh, I love it, Amy. I love it. That's the kind of stuff that I love. That's what makes you such a great person to hang out
You're
with
so
and bounce ideas
kind.
off. Well, no, it's not just too kind. You make great art. I mean, it'd be one thing if you, hey, Amy, you know how I am about certain things. Because I have an opinion about everything. If I love
Brainstorming
something, I love
is
something.
so much fun with a group of people. We
I
should
think
just go
I
do
think
that some weekend.
I think we should. All we need is some
Let's
talk radio, NPR. Let's just plastic bags and make some stuff. So what would be your advice to an up and coming young artist? Like I love this brainstorming, but if there was, other than brainstorming, what would you tell a young artist who's thinking about taking that brave step into creativity? What would you tell them?
The thing that I think is most important, and this is probably for everyone, get out there and visit everything you can. So many people say that, Dayton, there's nothing to do. There is so much to do. Just go find it. Just go into every little crevice of every building. There's something going on every weekend, every day, all the time. You know that, Rodney.
Oh yeah, I could
Explore,
say explore. I
get
echo your
involved.
sentiment. Get involved, because
Yeah.
it's important to it stimulates the ideas. It was like, I was very lucky that, when I was making this transition to the like, performative multidisciplinary art making, that
Hmm.
Dayton didn't say no to it. Like there wasn't like
Right.
a raised eyebrow like, what's this guy doing, putting sod and a pool of water on the third floor of a building with
Love
video
that.
projections and dancers.
Yes.
I mean, so I'm into that. That's why I got excited about let's wrap the Statue of Liberty in plastic bags with typography. Oh yes, yes. That could be. Oh, if anyone's listening, that is a $multi-million idea that could happen.
Now there are so many other places I want to wrap. Let's go to
well,
London and let's wrap the gherkin.
So, and London is one of my favorite cities because a lot of people don't know. Well, a lot of people don't know that I went to school in London, in England. I went to Beaumarsh College in Reading, exchange program. Yes. So I have this affinity. I was there for a semester and a half. I mean, I kind of took a little bit extra time, but a semester. It was like it was joyous 16 weeks of my life. It was real. That was a real game changer for me.
That's awesome.
Back in the 80s, back in the day. So as we're bringing things to a close, like, is there any big gallery show coming for you where people can see your work?
Well, in January, I have a solo exhibition at the James Cancer Center in Columbus, but I don't think they want a lot of people in there, still with COVID going on.
Yeah, but the Kroger's is coming, so that's good.
Right. Everybody go visit the new Kroger in Miamisburg, Ohio. I think they open in January.
There you go. See, you could see some Amy Deal art and do your grocery shopping at the same time.
Exactly.
I love it. So, Amy, you're super awesome, and thank you for sharing everything that's fabulous about you.
Thank you, Rodney. It was so much fun to talk to you, as always.
Ditto.
Rodney Veal's Inspired By is a production of Public Media Connect, the regional partnership of CET in Cincinnati and Think TV in Dayton. There's a lot of great art happening around Southwest Ohio, and we're excited to be part of it. If you like this episode, please subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can learn more and find the show notes at thinktv.org/inspiredby or cetconnect.org/inspiredby. Thank you.